Hello and welcome back to Tiny Artist TV. For today's video, I'm actually going to be doing something that I wanted to do at the beginning of the month. So, a little last year, I guess like sometime between November and December, as you can probably see this calendar on the back wall here, maybe you can, maybe you can't. I actually planned out the next 6 months of video themes. So, January got a little helter-skelter because we actually did some traveling for the new year, so the video that I was going to do for the 1st of January kind of got pushed to the wayside. And I figured since I didn't actually want to do today's scheduled video, this would be the perfect time to make up for that. So for January, I was actually going to do these like environmental studies, and that was mainly because I'm not a huge fan of like doing backgrounds and stuff like that, but also because I had no idea what to do for January like as a theme. Like all the other months it's kind of like obvious. Like for February you've got Black History Month. For March there's actually, I think it's called March of Robots, so it's another one of those 30-day drawing challenges, but I was only going to do like one a week because doing the 30-day drawing challenge like every day is not realistic for someone with my work schedule, and so just so on and so forth. So I have the next 6 months of like video themes planned out, but like I said, for January it was just kind of up in the air. So of course last week I did the Valentine's Day prints, and then the week before that I did the Pokemon Gajinka video, because that was one that I had missed in December. So now I'm kind of catching back up to what I was planning on doing for January. But yeah, so anyway, for today's video, which is actually, hopefully I can keep up with this, trying to do it on the 1st of every month, is a ZODIAC series. Now, I have done a ZODIAC series in the past, and I did them as stickers for my Redbubble account, but they're very flat. Like, they still look okay, but I wanted to do something that was more like in the style of what's on my computer wallpaper currently, kind of that like fleshed out fantasy whatever. So with that being said, today hey guys, me again. So I'm currently in the middle of editing, and I have been working on this piece for about 4.5 hours at this point, so we're actually going to split this video into 2 parts. We're going to be doing Capricorn. Now, even though we're in Aquarius season, Capricorn, since it was supposed to be on the 1st of January, is the correct one. And then of course I'll do Aquarius in February, and then down and so forth down the zodiac line. So let's go ahead and get started. So my initial thinking with tackling this piece was, once again, turning them into a fantasy element. So Capricorn is already a pretty, like, fantasy heavy idea. Like, the mythology behind Capricorn, or at least one of the stories behind Capricorn, is that the constellation is actually the immortalized version of Pan, who is in some, depending on what tale you read, a demigod. But anyway, Pan is a creature that has a man's top, still has goat horns, but then has a goat bottom half for his legs, and can also transform into a goat in certain instances. So anyway, how did Capricorn get immortalized in this great feat? Because the stars are saved for gods? Well, I'm glad you asked, imaginary audience. So apparently Zeus thought it fit after, and again, this is like one version of the story. I came across a couple versions, but they're relatively cohesive as far as the details go. So the gods of Olympus were hanging out in Egypt for whatever reason, and this was coming right after they were fighting the Titans. So in order to escape the Titans, Pan suggested that the gods turn themselves into animals to disguise themselves, and in a panic, which is funny because that's actually, we get the word panic from the god Pan. Anyway, in a panic, he jumps into the Nile River, but before he does that, he's only able to turn the bottom half of himself into a fish, so that's where we get the half goat, half fish form of Capricorn. So yeah, I just thought that was a fun little bit of trivia. And as you can see, we are getting deep into the concept sketch at this point. So some traits of Capricorn that kept coming up in my looking for elements to put into this piece was that Capricorns are very driven, very goal-oriented. So with Capricorn kind of having this magical aspect to them, being related to the demigods and having the ability to transform, I thought about turning her into a wizard. So another trait of Capricorns is that they tend to be a little more introverted, which is perfect because wizards are known to keep to themselves and their books. So we've got our Capricorn woman here sitting in this high tower doing her little practice studies. And as far as other elements, so because Capricorn is the main, or is the first symbol in January, I actually went ahead and pulled other elements from January as a birth month, and that's something that I'm going to be doing with the rest of the series as it goes on. So the birthstone for January is garnet, so there is a lot of deep, rich burgundy reds and of course, well, garnet reds. And then something else that I was looking up is that apparently rust is that orangish oxidized rust color is one of the colors for this month. So I put that in with her hair and then the bookshelves, but of course the main story of the show is her being a Capricorn with the goat skull helmet and then this long pool of this dress that's supposed to kind of evoke a bit of a tail. Initially I was going to give her a mermaid cut dress, but since she's sitting, it doesn't give the same effect. So instead I just have this dress spilling out behind her. And then, of course, we've got these large crystal pillars of garnet, and just, you know, typical wizard stuff. So yeah, at this point, I'm getting into the color blocking phase. Usually after I finish the sketch, I'll go one of two directions. I'll either just immediately jump into the color blocking phase, and just kind of helps me plan out, helps me more clearly bring what's in my head onto the canvas, or I'll stall a little bit if I don't know what color direction I'm going and do some line art first and then do the colors underneath of the line art, but I didn't need to do that for this piece. I do end up cutting that glass cage out because I was going to put some other little skulls and knickknacks and vials in there, and it just took up space and was just a really weird color because everything else in here is a warm red tone. Even the stones in the background, I chose a warm taupey gray versus a cooler slate gray to keep everything in this warm red, orange, brown color palette. And even though of course I'm getting rid of the glass cage, there is, as you can see, plenty of space on the bookshelf to do some other little knickknacks and odds and ends. So yeah, we're just finishing out the color blocking at this point, putting in a little more detail with the wood grain. And I probably mentioned this in one of my other videos, but I like to do something called working in the round, and I learned this when I was taking painting classes back in college. And it's, instead of focusing in one area, you kind of work all around so it comes together all together, and you're not just sitting there spending eons and eons working on one thing. You pick a piece and kind of pull a little detail out here, pull a little detail out there, so that you're getting the same amount of cohesion throughout the piece as you're working, instead of having one thing being hyper rendered and hyper realistic and then having another area being a little bit flatter because by the time you got to it, you were tired and you just didn't spend as much time on it. That is, however, ironically, another reason why this video is going to be a two-parter. And I know I mentioned at the beginning I'd been working on this for 4.5 hours, and I know for some of you guys that's nothing, which even for me that's nothing, but that's usually the amount of time I'll spend on a character piece that has one character minimal background, like large elements, but this one has small character, small pieces, full scenery. So I don't know why I thought I could get this done in one sitting, because I do have other things that I would like to do with my day. So that's why we're cutting this into 2 parts. We do get pretty far as the painting goes. We get to a pretty good stopping point, but the main thing that I have to do to finish this off once we get to where we stop is just really taking the time to render out those details. And I know it's going to take more time than I want to spend on it today, because I had started working on this at like 8 a.m.-ish. And of course I've been taking breaks on and off, but still just spending most of the day working on this. I want to stop before I get burnt out, so that I can come back to this with fresh eyes and just really deliver a piece that I am proud of, because where it is now, I'm happy with it, like when we get to the end of the video. And I don't want to mess that up by working through to the point where I get burnt out and then I end up having to just scrap all of the work altogether. So, like I said, part 2 of it is going to be more of a detail-oriented video. And at this point, I'm sure you've noticed that there are little bits of references all over my canvas. So usually when I reference something, I don't really bother to put it up on my canvas. I'll have it like off on like another tab or something where I can just kind of like boop, pop it up and like just look at it every now and then, or it'll be simple enough where I can look at it in the search bar and then just have it stick in my mind and then just go draw it. But for this, because there are so many small parts, and I just wanted to, like, you know, really have the references there to look at as much as I needed, I just stuck them right up on the canvas. Each one is on its own separate layer. Like, the goat skull is on the same layer as the other goat skull, and then the dress references are with the dress, and etc., etc. So that if I need to turn a layer off to see something else, it's not in the way. But yeah, it's just really helpful to have all of those things like just directly there. And another reason I don't really do this that often is because it does kind of crowd the canvas a little bit, but I had enough open space to work with that it wasn't an issue for this one. And now we're getting into the detail phase of the colored portion. So off the bat, as far as the dress goes, I get rid of the, it's kind of hard to see right now, but she has a small cape behind her. So I get rid of the cape pins, pick the color from the dress that I actually want, because this one here is more of a placeholder. It's close to the color that I want. I use the darker one just as a lining, and then I do go back in a little bit later and I think add a little bit more to it. But yeah, get rid of the cape pins, fill in the dress a little bit more, because the only thing I really wanted sheer was the cape and the sleeves. So the ribbing is going to have to go back in during the detail portion, but you'll see what I mean as far as that goes. And then for the cape and the sleeves, I just kind of blend in between the lines to give it that sheer appearance. And then of course, had I not done the body underneath of the dress, there wouldn't be anything to show for it. So that's why, and again, you'll see this later in the video, it's kind of a theme, that I do take the time to actually do a full form underneath of whatever clothing I'm drawing. Not just for the instance of, you know, having something underneath of the clothing, but it also just helps me more organically form where folds would fall or where details need to go, things like that, like belts, embellishments, jewelry, whatever else goes on to whatever outfit the character is wearing. This one is a little more simpler, and so it really is just kind of the dress falling over the body. But if I'm doing something like a corset or like a three-piece suit or like with Captain Frog, when I had to do like her blouse and pants and then the long coat, just having the body underneath of the clothes really helps instead of just doing a skeleton figure and then draping clothing over it. It makes a difference. If you haven't tried it, try it. So now I'm just going in and deciding that I don't want the dress to spill out on that section because it's a little weird and unbalanced. And I actually am going to go back in for part 2 and make it fan out behind her a little bit more, but for now I kind of cut it in and taper it just a little bit than where it is, because I just feel like the composition, the dress itself looks comfortable, but where the hand is placed on the dress looks uncomfortable. Like if she tries to get up, she might rip her dress. I don't know. I don't like it. So I get rid of it, even though it's there because it was in the initial sketch. So after I do all of, the velvety texture and the shine and all of that, just continue working on it. And it's not even at this point in the video, really, or I guess in the drawing. It's sometime later when I've worked on a few other elements and I come back and I look at it and I just don't like the way the dress is laying. So for now, we have this super shiny pool of silk, which I like this effect, which is why I decided that in the final cut, I'm going to come back to it and make it spill out so it can catch some of that sunlight. But where I end up cutting the dress in, which is actually, it's right here, it's very dark, and I want some more of that light to come in because all of the stonework in the bookshelves, everything else inside of it is very dark, and she's really the only thing catching light aside from the crystals. And even then, the crystals aren't really reflecting a lot of light because the light effect that I was doing on them ended up looking really cheesy, so I was doing the bare minimum. I was doing more of a glow than a flash on the crystals. So now I see here it just looks a little more comfortable, quote unquote. And then for the garnets, I decided that I want to do, so these are all, even though the red one is the standard garnet for January, garnets do come in this range of colors, so I thought it would be fun to kind of do a gradient of garnet colors around her. Like the different garnets evoke different things and she needs all of them to do a complete successful casting or like what have you. And they actually double as candle pillar stands as well. Pretty and practical. But as you can see here, I'm trying to do a little bit of like outline and crystal effect. Most of this is just burn and dodge. To get the different colors on the garnet, I did set my brush to screen. So the more you go over it, it has this like hollow glow effect to it and just really helps with outlining where you want the lights to hit and where you want your shadows to fall. And then after I get my colors laid out for the crystals, because right now I'm still burning in the darkest parts because I'm trying to get the facet, but because these are cut, they don't really have that many facets. So I go in with my eraser, and I think I have it set to like somewhere between 30 to 40. It's not really that high, just enough to get some of the color out of there, but like, and make it a little translucent, but not so much that you can't see where the color once was. Like it looks like a colored pane of glass, and I really like that effect. And so now I'm adding in the little candle stumps, and these are really just blocks of color, and I'm adding blobs wherever they need to go. Burn and dodge around the wax. And I say burn and dodge like it's kind of a throwaway thing. You do have to kind of know where you want your lights and your shadows to fall, but for me at this point it's kind of a throwaway thing. It's a quick way for me to get my lights and my shadows up there so that when I go back in and like really render this stuff out, it at least looks like 50 to 60% finished, and I'm not spending like an hour trying to render a candle, because they're obviously other things that demand more time in this piece. Candles ain't one of them. Although there was a piece I did that had candles galore, but that, you know, was actually kind of fun. But anyway, I'll toss that up at the end of, or maybe I'll toss it up here. There you go. Candles galore. Anyway, so now we're moving on to one of my favorite things to do, which is water effect. And I'm pretty sure I've explained the technique I use for water effects before, but I use my paintbrush with a softer setting, because this one is a little more like bubbly water. If this was a little more like hard splash effect, like something she was going to use to like damage or attack something, I would use a harder brush to make more definite lines. But because this is just like soft and floaty, I use a softer brush. And then I set my eraser to 20 to 30% and just kind of erase it out, add the highlights back in, and then erase that out a little bit too. And then for the flames, just using a little bit of the burn tool and then smudging only the outsides to give it that lick of flame effect, and then coming back down the middle to make it look like it's dancing a little bit. So we're actually getting pretty close to the end of part 1 of what is apparently a 2-part drawing session. If you guys stuck with me for this long, because this video is pushing like 22 minutes, more power to you. And if you did make it through to this point and you haven't subscribed yet, maybe think about subscribing, because apparently you like watching me draw, and that's all we're going to be doing on this channel, is going to be me sharing weird facts and drawing. But anyway, we've come to the end of today's video, so we'll see you for part 2. In the meantime, have a weird day.